Hi, and welcome to this Microsoft Foundry video, which is part 3, where we talk about agents. But before we do that, a small disclaimer, because Microsoft Foundry and the agent experience is still in preview, and honestly, it's quite buggy and half complete in various places, almost to the point where I didn't make this video. I will, at the end of the video, after I've explained how it should work and what works, I will explain a lot of the things that don't work, and then talk a little about what we should do from here. But let's first dive in and see what the claim is that we can do when this goes out of preview. So in order to understand this best, I have put in a normal scenario, which is working with agents in memory, the old AI Foundry, classic agents, as they're called now, and this new Microsoft Foundry, and see them side by side in order for us to better understand what is new in Foundry, at least on paper. So when you make a new agent, you of course just take the raw client, Azure OpenAI or OpenAI or similar. You do something similar in AI Foundry, but you do it using the azure.ai.agents.persistent NuGet package instead. And now in Microsoft Foundry, they have made yet another package. In this case, it's Microsoft Agents AI Azure AI. So far, nothing special. AI Foundry and Microsoft Foundry needs to do it using role-based access control, so you don't have an API key, while you can choose up in normal systems. But here it begins to differ. In a normal scenario, you just create your agent in Agent Framework. You give it model, instruction, tools, and it already happens in memory. In AI Foundry, you create an agent as a persistent agent, meaning something where you create it, it's there, and then you can reference it later, so you don't need to create it again and again. So the first time you create it, and then you use it after the fact. By just referencing it. So you only need to go and change the agent if you need to update something. This is also the same for Microsoft Foundry, but can just do a little more, because up here we have model, tools, instructions, tools. Down here we have knowledge up front, which is vector stores that it can automatically search into and stuff like that. That's more a manual process up here. In the new Foundry, you also have a new memory component where you can let it remember certain things about the user if you give it the user scope, like what is their name, location, and such things. A little like the provider context in Agent Framework. And then again, we reference them by the existing name, and up here it's by ID, down here it's by name, and it can also now work with versions, which I will get into in a bit. So on paper here, an even greater system than the AI Foundry. And the final part is, of course, consuming it. Up in a normal one, you just consume the agent you just made in code. In AI Foundry, you either consumed the agent you just made or got the reference to the agent, and then you used it. And then on the fly, you could add more knowledge and more tools to the fact. In Microsoft Foundry, this is completely changed in various different ways. First up, all agents have a version, so you can now make a version 3, but still reference version 2, for example. So whenever you start here, you either need to, if you don't specify, you just get the latest, but you can specify an earlier version. I will show that in a live sample in just 1 second. And then you consume it, but the new system is that you should actually not do that. Or they're kind of vague on what you should do and what you shouldn't do. You can do it, but you can also publish an agent, meaning that it gets its own endpoint. So, and the reason for that is that then your user should not know about your Foundry, and if you make a new version and you publish that, you can choose when it should be published to the user. So you can set and build, while here you can choose when to publish. And these published versions can then be consumed by Agent Framework using the Responses API, or it can be consumed in Microsoft Teams and Microsoft 365. This is what the documentation and everything tells you what you can do and what's new. And this is really exciting because it's a really good system and having these things. But a few things break down. I will show a little of them now in a live demo, and then we will talk a little about the rest of them after the fact. But let's jump in here. And I have Microsoft Foundry here in my sample repo, which is linked in the description of this video. And I have a lot of old classic agents from the AI Foundry before. And then I have this new one, Agents Basic. And I made a basic one if we make more advanced stuff with tooling and stuff. And if we look at what we need in order to do this, we just need Azure Identity, and we need Azure AI package from the Agent Framework. And up in the portal here, I don't have any agents right now. I could go in and make an agent and then just use it in code. So I don't need to build the agent in code if I don't want to. I could simply say, just create an agent, choose what model I want to use, write some instructions, add some tools, and then I could test it from here. Or I could go in and use it in code just using the name test, because all agents in the same project needs to have a unique name. I could then publish the agent, and when published, I will get some URLs. And apparently it takes a little extra time to publish today. And I could get an activity protocol that's for Microsoft Teams and the bot service, and Response API, where I get that this URL is specific to this agent, meaning the name is in the URL. So everything can be done up from here. I could go in and say I want the code interpreter tool, and then it would know the code interpreter tool and so on. But I can also make them in code. And you can see I actually saved it twice, one for when I published and the other when I add the code interpreter tool. So now I have two versions, by the way. And I can go back to version 1 where I didn't have the tool. So pretty neat that you can do it up here. Of course, it's all about normal resources. Is this infrastructure as code? Probably would be best if we made the agents in code, and they will auto create themselves if someone goes and by mistake delete the agent up here. But that's all a matter of opinion. Let's see it in code at least. So if we run the code, we will just take it line by line. So first we make something called an AI project client. Let me just move it down here. And this comes from this Azure AI projects. And then there's another subfolder for OpenAI, which is kind of silly now that Claude can be used as tools. So we are using technically a namespace called projects.openai to work with Claude as well. But we have done that for ages with the Azure OpenAI tool that can run Mistral and all the other models anyway. In any case, we have the AI project client where we just give a endpoint and our Azure CLI credentials. In my case, I set up Azure CLI in, let me find up here, and there's the AZ tool where I've logged in, and that will give me my credentials. Up in Azure, of course, they are given by the tool and the managed identities, and here you could use default Azure credentials in order to get them from the Visual Studio and stuff instead. But I just use this because it's the fastest one, despite it being slow. Then, if we want to make an agent, we of course need the model, and this client can actually also work with the deployments. It can list the deployments, but unfortunately it can't create the deployment. So we couldn't go from just having a project to getting the model deployed and up and running, but at least we can check if our model exists. I'm doing it with a try catch method here, but I could also just have listed all deployments and then loop through, is there a deployment called GPT-4.1 Mini? In my case, it exists, so I don't get this error, but I also get the error, and in my case, I will just write out that it wasn't found. I do this similar with the agents, where I just ask for the agent by name, and if that fails, which it will, because we don't have it, we get a 404. And we will just say, okay, the agent doesn't exist, let's create it. And in my case, I'm sending into the instructions here because I later on want to make a version 2 with other instructions. And in this case, it was URNice AI. And then we use the client.agents.create agent version. So we always make versions instead of agents, because the first time it will just be version 1. We don't specify the version or anything. That just happens automatically. So in order to create an agent, we need a name, and we need to give it some options in terms of agent version creation options. And there's various different agent versions, some being hosted, some being file-based, image-based, and so on. But we want a prompt agent definition, meaning a normal agent. I have not seen what the others can be used for at the moment, so that it might be for some future projects or something I haven't noticed in the system. But if we make this, let me just make it so we can see the code. We can give tools in here. So we give tools, for example, and if we want to make a code interpreter tool, like OpenAI have it, we can do that. We need to tell what container that should be in, and we can make it create an automatic container, so we don't need to do anything. This is a little more cumbersome than the old Azure AI Foundry, where we just told it code interpret tools, but it's because it can also hook up to existing containers, so it doesn't need to spin them up. In our case, we just do that. We can also give it web search, which is fine. And you can technically give MCP tools, but this is one of the buggy things that are right now, in that we can make a tool, meaning a remote MCP tool, but if we do that, it will just call it, but never complete it, because built into the portal is that it needs approval for MCP tools, and Agent Framework can't handle that approval process right now. So that's the reason I've taken it away, but else it's just a name and a URL, which also is a bit buggy in my mind, because if you had a remote MCP tool that needed a API key and its headers, you wouldn't be able to give that through this agent NuGet package right now. Moving on, we can do instructions. We have talked about that. And there's also options for reasoning options, but this is also buggy at the moment. So if you set them, the portal will completely ignore it, set every model to high for some reason, even though the default is medium. If you try to set it like this, it will not recognize it, and it will ask every time you do anything to your agent, hey, it's unsaved, because it looks at the behind the scenes data, and that's different from what it sees itself. So right now, effectively, we can't set the reasoning effort, which is a huge bug in my opinion. The old portal also had it, unfortunately. There's also file search tools and such things, but these were just a simple one to set up. So now we have created our agents, and now we can get it as Microsoft Agent Framework. And for that, we just simply say client.getAIagent, and we just give it the name. And behind the scenes, it will go up and find the right one, because everyone have a unique name. So now we have a normal client with instructions and our normal stats with the tools we have made. And now we can ask it, of course, let's say hi there to it. And it will come back. Hello, how can I assist you? So nothing special there. Then I will tell it what is this last number times this line now divided by this number, and ask it to use tools to calculate, showing that it can use the code interpreter tool. This will take a little while because it needs to spin up a container up in Azure, do the Python code it will generate to answer this, execute that Python, get it back, and then we are up and running. But we can see that it calculated what it was, and behind the scenes in the messages, we can see some content about that it was called with code interpreter and what code it was behind the scenes and stuff. So it was this down here. Nothing special, we get the result back. Now we try to say what is the biggest story for today, and today is the 9th of December 2025 when this is recorded. And if I know my American politics, it's probably something about Trump, but let's see. So this is behind the scenes using Bing now, but in the past you needed to make a Bing account and stuff. Now they just say you don't need to do that, but you're still built for the calls, just like you are for the code interpret calls. So it will say that it's something about the Supreme Court and President Trump. Don't want to go into politics, so we just have it like that. So now we have asked it and used its tools and stuff, and so far sort of okay, except for a few mistakes or limitations so far. Now we're going to try and call the create agent again. By the way, if we just look up in the portal and refresh, we can see our agent up here. And we can see that it has what it was. It has the code interpreter tool. And here's one more mistake the system have. It can't show the web search tool, despite it being here, because the real web search tool is in preview, but it still reacts to web search. So a bit messy again. Up here we can also see the conversations we had with it. I've used this name before, so it has multiple conversations. And we can see that it used the web search tool to get this text and generated the response back and so on. But what we can also see is that this is in version 1. And if I go in and give it a new instruction, meaning I just call the same code as I did when I created it, and the only difference is that it has to speak like a pirate now. So if I do that, and we go up in system here, we can now see that it's version 2, and it has speak like a pirate, and version 1 had UL Nice AI. What I can do is I could also just drag it up here and say, oh, I want a version 3. So if we do that and call the same code again and go to the portal, we will see we don't get a version 3 because it will actually check, is there any differences in the agent definition? And if not, then let's not make a new version. So it's perfectly safe to call create version if you are okay with the extra time it takes in order to be sure that your agent is just like as you have defined it in the code. In any case, we have now said it needs to speak like a pirate, so we just get the agent again. So this is version 2 of the agent. And we'll just say hi there. And it will come back with Ohoi matey. So we now hit version 2. But if we want to hit version 1, we can, in that we can go to client agents.get agent version async, and we can say, give me my agent in version number 1. And if we do that, we get a version back, something called an agent version from the portal. And we can now get our agent by version. So this one might be a good idea if you use it like this and you want to build new versions, but have the users still run on a version, and then in your code bump up, now I want to run version 3, now I want to run version 4, and so on. So agent by version we get, and we can now ask agent 1. It doesn't know it's agent 1, but it was one to write. And when it comes back, it doesn't say hello matey, because this is the version that had, it was just a nice AI. But if we asked version 2, it would speak like a pirate. And that is all the code. But let's run it again and see what happens up here. Now that we have our agent, and it shouldn't surprise that, of course, we have our model. We had that before. And if we ask for our agent, it have the agent, so it didn't throw an exception, so we can just use the agent. So now we're not calling create agent anymore, and we're just using the one that is up there. And the answers will be the same, but remember that now that we're just calling the agent, it will be version 2, which is the one that speaks like a pirate. So for that reason, we will see that it will come back. So, but else it will be exactly the same once it wakes up. But I think you get the point. We could then make a version 3 that didn't speak like a pirate. So when we hit this, it will essentially not do anything. It will not. It will make version 2 again. So now we come back with that, and I don't want to spend your time on this. But we need to talk a little about the limitations, because it has been a real struggle making this video. It's taken me all day to find these simple things, because when you just look at the surface, 80 to 90% works, but the last percentages, which are very important, at least in my mind, makes this a very tough sell, meaning I would never ever go live with what we have right now, to be honest. But let's talk a little about the 8 things I have found that are broken and buggy right now, and there might be more. First up, one of the big problems is that we can't set the reasoning effort. We could go up in the GUI and do it, but then we couldn't use code to make our agents. So if you want to live with you needing to set the reasoning effort up in code instead, or in the GUI, you could live with this problem. To me, reasoning effort is so important because it's simply too expensive to run the ChatGPT-5 models with reasoning on for every single little question. For the good stuff and hard and complex stuff, it's really good. But for the other ones, I want to go down to minimal or none, and we can't do that. Second, we can't mix hosted tools and ad hoc tools. You could in the old AI Foundry, so it might come back. But right now, for example, we couldn't go and have the code interpreter tool and then a local ad hoc tool like get the weather or whatever we want. That is simply not possible. We can get ad hoc tools to work, but then it's only ad hoc tools. Or we can get hosted tools to work, and then it's only ad hoc tools. But we can't mix the two in a good manner at the moment. A few things works, but not all, and this is a really deal breaker for me as well. Hosted MCP tools, yes, we can define them, but the agent framework will just get back, hey, I want to do this tool call, but it doesn't know about the tools, so it can't understand what's going on and ask us to approve it. And on the Foundry side, we don't have the setting to say if something doesn't need to ask for approval, and we can't set headers in any way or authentication. So that's also a big deal breaker compared to running them locally. The WebSuite tool work, and again, it's easier to work, but the GUI doesn't display it. That is not a big deal. We can go around that, of course, but it's annoying that it isn't there and being shown. Then I didn't show it, but up here in the agents, there's something called a memory component. And if you turn it on, it will make a memory store. And then you should be able to go in and say, hey, my name is Rasmus, remember that. Go to a new thread, a new conversation, and ask, what is my name? That works 50% of the time, it seems. And we can't define this in code in any way. It's simply not in the NuGet package that we can do it. So I wouldn't rely on this. I would use AI context provider instead myself. But it simply doesn't work at the moment. Then there's the knowledge system, which is kind of a big mess. You can press knowledge here and say add. I have never really gotten it to work really well. And even when I get it to work, it can call it sometimes, but it can't really do anything with it. And I've tried various ways to try and get this to work together. The entire knowledge section here is rough to be honest. And it's mostly built on AI search, which is a really expensive resource to run at the same time. So I would probably not use it in real life anyway. Disclaimer, I haven't looked endlessly into it, but it's when I even can't use this GUI to set it up, then there is something wrong, and you can't set it up in the code either. Then there is that these published agents are not properly supported. You get this URL, but agent framework or OpenAI's own NuGet package can't support that URL. There is some breaking glass, meaning go in and do some hacks to get it working in the system. But I talked with the team and they said that there's no documentation and no information about it, and you need to go into the raw call and on the fly get rid of stuff to get it working, and I would not be very happy to do that. And then we end up, why have they made publish agents in the first place when we can already hit them by version and stuff? Yeah, it must be because they want us to actually go live in production scenarios with these versions instead of hooking up to Microsoft Foundry. But given that it doesn't work yet, is yet another issue. I could probably live with this one because why not just use the Foundry, but bigger companies might have a problem with this. Then publish to Microsoft Teams and Microsoft 365 sounds so cool on paper that you can more or less without any code, if you just use the portal, get an agent in there with your own instructions and everything. I have not made it to work. It makes some agent services and it says prepare agent, it press OK and nothing happens, and then you can try again and then you can't publish the agent again. I might be doing something wrong. It could be that I might have not enough permissions in the setups I have. But if it works, it's at least not easy to do. So this, and then the portal being slow at times and stuff, but these are the big things I have found that really makes me hesitant on what to do from now. Because what do we do with this series? I can soldier on. The next video would be about workflows, which probably are also a lot of buggy. So I'm a bit unsure if it's better to wait a couple of months to continue this series, make a version 3 take 2 where all the stuff works and then continue there. Or if you want to see everything that is in there right now with all the buggy stuff as well, there's certain things I can't show. So I'm generally interested in figuring out if you want more in this series, or this was the first step in the series and we will take a break and come back when things are actually working, because you can definitely not go live on this in my opinion, or I wouldn't do it. The needs might be less than what I have, but especially reasoning effort and mix of tools is a major deal breaker for me, in my opinion. But sound off in the comments and let's see if there will be a part 4 or not in this series. Up to you guys. But in any case, see you in whatever next video is there.